Thank you. Thank you all very much. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, distinguished members of Congress, honored guests, and fellow citizens. Only a month ago, I was your guest in this historic building, and I pledged to you my cooperation in doing what is right for this nation that we all love so much. I'm here tonight to reaffirm that pledge and to ask that we share in restoring the promise that is offered to every citizen by this, the last best hope of man on earth. All of us are aware of the punishing inflation which has, for the first time in 60 years, held to double-digit figures for 2 years in a row. Interest rates have reached absurd levels of more than 20% and over 15% for those who would borrow to buy a home. All across this land, one can see newly built homes standing vacant, unsold, because of mortgage interest rates. Almost 8 million Americans are out of work. These are people who want to be productive. But as the months go by, despair dominates their lives. The threats of layoff and unemployment hang over other millions, and all who work are frustrated by their inability to keep up with inflation. One worker in a Midwest city put it to me this way. He said, "I'm bringing home more dollars than I ever believed I could possibly earn, but I seem to be getting worse off." And he is. Not only have hourly earnings of the American worker, after adjusting for inflation, declined 5% over the past 5 years, but in these 5 years, federal personal taxes for the average family have increased 67%. We can no longer procrastinate and hope that things will get better. They will not. Unless we act forcefully, and now, the economy will get worse. Can we who man the ship of state deny it is somewhat out of control? Our national debt is approaching $1 trillion. A few weeks ago, I called such a figure, $1 trillion, incomprehensible. And I've been trying ever since to think of a way to illustrate how big $1 trillion really is. And the best I could come up with is that if you had a stack of $1,000 bills in your hand, only 4 inches high, you'd be a millionaire. $1 trillion would be a stack of $1,000 bills 67 miles high. The interest on the public debt this year, we know, will be over $90 billion. And unless we change the proposed spending for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, we'll add another almost $80 billion to the debt. Adding to our troubles is a mass of regulations imposed on the shopkeeper, the farmer, the craftsman, professionals, and major industry that is estimated to add $100 billion to the price of the things we buy, and it reduces our ability to produce. The rate of increase in American productivity, once one of the highest in the world, is among the lowest of all major industrial nations. Indeed, it has actually declined in the last 3 years. Now, I've painted a pretty grim picture, but I think I've painted it accurately. It is within our power to change this picture, and we can act with hope. There's nothing wrong with our internal strengths. There has been no breakdown in the human, technological, and natural resources upon which the economy is built. Based on this confidence in a system which has never failed us, but which we have failed through a lack of confidence and sometimes through a belief that we could fine-tune the economy and get a tune to our liking, I am proposing a comprehensive 4-point program. Now let me outline in detail some of the principal parts of this program. You'll each be provided with a completely detailed copy of the entire program. This plan is aimed at reducing the growth in government spending and taxing, reforming and eliminating regulations which are unnecessary and unproductive or counterproductive, and encouraging a consistent monetary policy aimed at maintaining the value of the currency. If enacted in full, this program can help America create 13 million new jobs, nearly 3 million more than we would have without these measures. It will also help us to gain control of inflation. It's important to note that we're only reducing the rate of increase in taxing and spending. We are not attempting to cut.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday to everybody out there listening. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Paul. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are building a liberty machine. We want you to be a part of that. One of the ways you can do that is to call us or text us 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. We got a busy news day to get to, some breaking news. But before we do that, let's just have a little fun, right? It's Johnny Cash Friday. Welcome to the program. Now, for those of you who don't know, Johnny Cash Friday, a day where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day and the week. It's Johnny Cash, an Arkansas legend, an Arkansas tradition, and we certainly, I personally love his music. So we're going to be doing that today. For our online audience, though, you guys are going to be getting President Ronald Reagan's first 1981 State of the Union address. Anyway, it's pretty good. You need to listen to it. If you're watching us instead of listening only, if you're watching us on our multiple platforms, YouTube, live stream, Conduit News, as well as Facebook.com/Conduit News, and you can sound off on there, by the way. Oh, my goodness, folks, have you heard about what is it called? Arkansas Youth Services. No, actually, it's a company it's a defunct company named South Arkansas Youth Services. South Arkansas Youth Services of Magnolia. They're in the news today. Well, specifically, the former director of the South Arkansas Youth Services, a man by the name of Jerry Walsh. The Arkansas Business publication had this story that spread like wildfire yesterday because Jerry Walsh pled guilty to a scheme involving at least one Arkansas senator and, wait for it, Milton Rusty Russell Cranford. That's right, this scheme doesn't seem to end. Once again, as Conduit News and what I've been saying for a while, ladies and gentlemen, the corruption of this state and what our own government is doing, what the people working in the government are doing to enrich themselves, it's in the headlines on almost a daily basis. On almost a daily basis, this stuff is in the headlines, shaming us. We have got to demand somebody hold our government officials accountable. Now, I'm going to get into the details of this plea and the details of this case, and most people have already connected the dots out there, but I'm going to do it. But at some point, after we get through with that, we have to have some form of confidence in our elected officials. And there are elected officials, both past and present, that need to be indicted. They need to be put on trial, and I don't know what the delay is here. We have got, at some point, we have to demand that these senators are charged, not just the lobbyists, not just the people. Now, I mean, we obviously have had, Jake Files, John Woods, Mike and Neal. You've obviously had plea agreements from Eddie Cooper and Hank Wilkins. So you have this. You do have something here. Did Eddie Cooper make a plea? I'm sorry. I get confused here. I can't remember who's made a plea and who's not. But anyway, the bottom line is you have some movement here, but it seems like there's some kid gloves being applied in other areas. And I hope I'm wrong here, but I think some of these, for example, I think the justice system needs to realize, the prosecutors specifically, how much the people of Arkansas are counting on you to do your job and to bring justice when it is obvious in the headlines to the people what's been going on here. We have attorneys who are legislators who have essentially been enriching themselves but using their law firms as a cover. They're not doing legal work. They're just taking money for retainer and passing bills for their clients. That is the situation. It's been going on for a long time. People have tried to stop it, like Senator Linda Collins Smith last year. She tried to stop it. They weren't having any of it. We wrote a parody about it. As long as your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. If I'm writing satirical parodies, do you think that everybody down in the Marble Palace knows this has been going on? Yes, they know it's been going on, but they're not doing anything about it. And yet we've got these ethics reforms, and they want you to think that these senators are going to rat each other out. Self-reporting, give me a break. They could have been doing that now. They could have been doing that this entire time, the FBI, in a multi-year investigation that started, in my opinion, this is my speculation, it started with general improvement investigations and the fraud out of general improvement fund grants and the kickbacks there, but then it led into Medicaid. And that's where we are now. Arkansas business with this scoop here. According to plea documents, basically you have a nonprofit. Now think about this for a second. This is where it gets even worse, where these people have no shame. This is a nonprofit that is supposed to focus on at-risk juveniles. And in order to keep their contracts, they enlist the help of lobbyists and politicians to make sure that they keep their contracts. You think, is it really about the kids? No, it's not about the kids. It's about making money. It's about government contracts. It's less about the service you're delivering and more about your own financial well-being. That's true for the nonprofit here in Jerry Walsh. It's also true for the politicians. They claim to serve the people, but they're actually just giant hypocrites. Prosecutors said, well, let's quote Dwayne Keese for a second. Dwayne Keese is the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Arkansas. And he said this about the plea. This plea exposes the depths to which pay-to-play politics has corrupted a nonprofit organization which was formed with the best of intentions to help children. Seems like there's a lot of profit potential in nonprofits. Am I right? Prosecutors said Walsh admitted, again, this is from Arkansas Business, that beginning in 2013 while serving at the South Arkansas Youth Services nonprofit as the executive director, he agreed to divert SAYS, South Arkansas Youth Services money, to Rusty Cranford and an unnamed Arkansas state senator in exchange for the state's senator's influence in protecting the nonprofit state contracts with the Department of Human Services and the Department of Youth Services. As part of the deal, Walsh was to provide a monthly legal retainer to the senator, and here's the kicker, according to Jerry Walsh in this plea, without the expectation that the senator ever provide any legal work. Here's from the plea. Here's the quote from the actual plea. Quote, instead, the purpose of the payment was to obtain the senator's assistance in preserving the contracts in his official capacity, prosecutors said. According to the plea, again, this is more on this. According to the plea, the amount paid to the senator was negotiated by convicted lobbyist Rusty Cranford and amounted to over $120,000. Unbelievable here. Now, okay, so now notice in this guilty plea, the politician in question is labeled Senator C, not Senator A. Seems like they've invented a new title, right? You see, Senator A has been, well, I mean, for the most part, in previous pleas, and I'm talking about the Hank Wilkins bribery plea deal that he pled guilty to, and then the Rusty Cranford bribery plea deal. Now, why did Rusty roll on all these people? Why did Rusty Cranford roll on everybody? Seems like Rusty Cranford, this is who he gave up. I'm speculating here, but I know Rusty Cranford in his plea turned on Jeremy Hutchinson and said, I bribed him $500,000. But it seems like he rolled on Michael Lamoureux. That's right, Asa Hutchinson's former chief of staff and the former president pro temp of the Senate from Russellville, Michael Lamoureux. That is apparently who Senator C is. It's either Senator C is either Michael Lamoureux or Jeremy Hutchinson, but it looks like, and I'll get into the specifics of that later, it looks like it's Michael Lamoureux. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. Now, this is no surprise. Michael Lamoureux has been in the news that one of the reasons he had to resign as the governor's chief of staff. By the way, Asa can really pick winners. Doesn't Asa Hutchinson really pick winners? Or he's really unlucky. Gosh, the governor is so unlucky. You know, look at the people the governor surrounds himself with. Jeremy Hutchinson, Michael Lamoureux, Jake Files, John Woods. This guy is just the most unlucky guy with his associations. He's so unlucky. I mean, you got to feel sorry for him. Or he just is, I don't know, maybe these are the types of people. These are the types of people who will go against what the voters put them in office for, and they just happen to come with all of this baggage. You know, all of this tendency for legal graft, so they think, but it's actually illegal graft. Maybe that's what's going on here. Or, I mean, I'll reference you back to Jake Files. When Jake Files, who, you know, is pled guilty to stealing taxpayer money to enrich himself, when all of the stuff was coming out, drip by drip by drip, for like a year, he maintained his innocence, and he maintained that there was some conspiracy. And we said at the time, wow, you know, he's either the most unlucky businessman in the world because every business venture, he's just in all this financial trouble, or he's actually, and I kind of feel the same way about the governor. I mean, he's either the most unlucky politician ever with his associations here locally, or, you know, he just, I don't know, actually likes him. I mean, he did throw a fundraiser for John Woods when everybody knew this was going on. Everybody knew this was going on with Michael Lamoureux, for example. Everybody knows what's been going on with Jeremy Hutchinson. These are not rumors. People, come on. I know the governor referenced the federal court documents implicating Jeremy Hutchinson the other day. As, well, this is not rumors. These are actual charges against State Representative Mickey Gates, who hasn't paid his taxes. Give me a break. Rumors? Really? Are we really going to tell with a straight face that this is just all rumor? Good grief. So, let's actually get into the, let's just get to the plea. We'll go over here to the plea bargain, because this is what is interesting, because we actually figure out Senator C. So Senator C seems like a new title. Senator A was Jeremy Hutchinson in the previous two plea deals that we have read. And now we have a Senator C. Now, there was also a Senator B. I really think they're keeping things straight here. Are they gonna Senator B ended up being Senator Eddie Cheatham mentioned, and I think that was the Hank Wilkins one, if you'll remember that. Okay, relevant individuals, entities, and programs. Let's actually get to the, here we go. This is what's interesting. Let's see, no, hang on. They're listening. Get down to the object of the conspiracy. Okay? Now, here's the key. This scheme, according to the documents, went on from in or about 2013. And what were they doing in 2013? What was going on in 2013? Oh, yeah, they were getting all kinds of money to pass the private option. You remember that? From in or about 2013 until in or about 2016, in the Western District of Arkansas, El Dorado Division, and elsewhere, the defendant, Jerry Kennedy Walsh, together with Cranford, Arkansas Senator C., and others known and unknown to the United States, did knowingly and unlawfully conspire, confederate, and agree together with each other to embezzle, steal, obtain by fraud, intentionally misapply, and otherwise without authority from SAYS, that's South Arkansas Youth Services. We're talking about using kids, or the concept of trying to take care of kids to enrich yourselves. I'm sorry, it just birds me up. Knowingly convert to the use of Cranford, Person 4, Arkansas Senator C, and others known and unknown to the United States, property that was valued at $5,000 or more and was owned by, under the care, custody, and control of SAYS, an organization receiving in a one-year period from July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2014, benefits in excess of $10,000 under a federal program in violation of Title 18 United States Code. Purposes of the conspiracy. The purpose of the conspiracy included, but was not limited to, the following. For Jerry Walsh to enrich South Arkansas Youth Services out of Magnolia by diverting South Arkansas Youth Services funds without authority from South Arkansas Youth Services Board of Directors to Arkansas Senator C, in the form of retainers and legal fees in exchange for Arkansas Senator C agreeing to take favorable official action to benefit Walsh, South Arkansas Youth Services, and others known and unknown to the United States, including influencing Arkansas officials to preserve contracts between South Arkansas Youth Services and the state of Arkansas, and to influence DHS and DYS from taking negative action against South Arkansas Youth Services. For Walsh to enrich South Arkansas Youth Services by diverting SAYS funds without authority from the Board of Directors to Cranford and his lobbying firm, and to Person 4, who's a relative of Cranford, through payments for a job for which Person 4 was not expected to perform any work, in exchange for Cranford and others known and unknown to the United States influencing Arkansas officials to preserve contracts between the company and the state of Arkansas, and to influence DHS and DYS from taking negative action against the company. For Arkansas Senator C to enrich himself by accepting funds diverted from the nonprofit in the form of retainers and legal fees from Walsh, the company, and others known and unknown to the United States, in exchange for Arkansas Senator C agreeing to take favorable official action to benefit Walsh, the nonprofit, and others known and unknown, including but not limited to influencing Arkansas officials to preserve contracts, and, goes on like that for a while. When we come back, we're going to get to the manner and means of how this happened. We're going to speculate who is Senator C, although there's not much speculation involved, especially when you look at the definition of who Senator C is. We'll go over that as well. We're also going to revisit some Arkansas Times stories, because after the Hank Wilkins plea came out, they got Jerry Walsh to admit that he, in fact, did use the services, the legal services, quote, legal services, of Senator Michael Lamoureux and Senator Jeremy Hutchinson. We'll talk more about this when we come back. This is Conduit News Radio.
Either spending or taxing levels below that which we presently have. This plan will get our economy moving again, productivity growth, and thus create the jobs that our people must have. And I'm asking that you join me in reducing direct federal spending by $41.4 billion in fiscal year 1982, along with another And this goes along with another $7.7 billion in user fees and off-budget savings for a total of $49.1 billion. And this will still allow an increase of $40.8 billion over 1981 spending. Now, I know that exaggerated and inaccurate stories about these cuts have disturbed many people, particularly those dependent on grant and benefit programs for their basic needs. Some of you have heard from constituents I know, afraid that Social Security checks, for example, were going to be taken away from them. Well, I regret the fear that these unfounded stories have caused, and I welcome this opportunity to set things straight. We will continue to fulfill the obligations that spring from our national conscience. Those who, through no fault of their own, must depend on the rest of us, the poverty-stricken, the disabled, the elderly, all those with true need, can rest assured that the social safety net of programs they depend on are exempt from any cuts. The full retirement benefits of the more than 31 million Social Security recipients will be continued along with an annual cost of living increase. Medicare will not be cut, nor will supplemental income for the blind, the aged, and the disabled, and funding will continue for veterans' pensions. School breakfasts and lunches for the children of low-income families will continue, as will nutrition and other special services for the aging. There will be no cut in Project Head Start or summer youth jobs. All in all, nearly $216 billion worth of programs providing help for tens of millions of Americans will be fully funded. But government will not continue to subsidize individuals or particular business interests where real need cannot be demonstrated. And while we will reduce some subsidies to regional and local governments, we will at the same time convert a number of categorical grant programs into block grants to reduce wasteful administrative overhead and to give local governments and states more flexibility and control. We call for an end in duplication to federal programs and reform of those which are not cost effective. Now, already some have protested that there must be no reduction in aid to schools. Well, let me point out that federal aid to education amounts to only 8% of the total educational funding. And for this 8%, the federal government has insisted on tremendously disproportionate share of control over our schools. Whatever reductions we've proposed in that 8% will amount to very little in the total cost of education. They will, however, restore more authority to states and local school districts.
We come back. All right, so check this out, folks. Welcome back to the program. Number 15, a little further back up, scrolling back up, who is Arkansas Senator C? If you're just joining us, we've got another guy that's pled guilty for a nonprofit with a scheme with Rusty Cranford and another unnamed senator. Arkansas Senator C served as a senator in the Arkansas Senate during the 89th General Assembly. Okay, that could be either Michael Lamoureux or Jeremy Hutchinson. Arkansas Senator C, due to his senior position in the Arkansas Senate, had the power to prevent bills from coming to the floor for a vote. Now, that's interesting because you would think, well, Michael Lamoureux is the president pro temp of the Senate. He would have that authority. But Jeremy Hutchinson is also, what, the chair of the Judiciary? We need to find out if he was the chair of the Judiciary back in the 89th General Assembly. Because if we're talking about Arkansas Youth Services and it was a nonprofit, a now defunct, I think, phony nonprofit trying to look out for the interests of juveniles, well, that's going to be in the justice system arena, and that might come through the and by the way, let's remember that Jeremy Hutchinson has been he's been trying to run criminal justice reform, and he has successfully done it in the past. That it was going to save a bunch of money, and it did the complete opposite. But it does appear that Senator C is a new player to the game, implicated Michael Lamoureux, but we'll be back with more on this in a minute.
Historically, the American people have supported, by voluntary contributions, more artistic and cultural activities than all the other countries in the world put together. I wholeheartedly support this approach and believe that Americans will continue their generosity. Therefore, I'm proposing a savings of $85 million in the federal subsidies now going to the arts and humanities. There are a number of subsidies to business and industry that I believe are unnecessary, not because the activities being subsidized aren't of value, but because the marketplace contains incentives enough to warrant continuing these activities without a government subsidy. One such subsidy is the Department of Energy's Synthetic Fuels Program. We will continue support of research leading to development of new technologies and more independence from foreign oil. But we can save at least $3.2 billion by leaving to private industry the building of plants to make liquid or gas fuels from coal. We're asking that another major industry, business subsidy I should say, the Export-Import Bank Loan Authority, be reduced by 1/3 in 1982. We're doing this because the primary beneficiaries of taxpayer funds in this case are the exporting companies themselves, most of them profitable corporations. This brings me to a number of other lending programs in which government makes low-interest loans, some of them at an interest rate as low as 2%. What has not been very well understood is that the Treasury Department has no money of its own to lend. It has to go into the private capital market and borrow the money. So in this time of excessive interest rates, the government finds itself borrowing at an interest rate several times as high as the interest it gets back from those it lends the money to. And this difference, of course, is paid by your constituents, the taxpayers. They get hit again if they try to borrow, because government borrowing contributes to raising all interest rates. By terminating the Economic Development Administration, we can save hundreds of millions of dollars in 1982 and billions more over the next few years. There's a lack of consistent and convincing evidence that EDA and its regional commissions have been effective in creating new jobs. They have been effective in creating an array of planners, grantsmen, and professional middlemen. We believe we can do better just by the expansion of the economy and the job creation which will come from our economic program. The food stamp program will be restored to its original purpose, to assist those without resources to purchase sufficient nutritional food. We will, however, save $1.8 billion in fiscal year 1982 by removing from eligibility those who are not in real need or who are abusing the program. But even with this reduction, the program will be budgeted for more than $10 billion. We will tighten welfare and give more attention to outside sources of income when determining the amount of welfare an individual is allowed. This, plus strong and effective work requirements, will save $520 million in the next year. I stated a moment ago our intention to keep the school breakfast and lunch programs for those in true need. But by cutting back on meals for children of families who can afford to pay, the savings will be $1.6 billion in fiscal year 1982. Now let me just touch on a few other areas which are typical of the kind of reductions we've included in this economic package. The Trade Adjustment Assistance Program provides benefits for workers who are unemployed when foreign imports reduce the market for various American products, causing shutdown of plants and layoff of workers. The purpose is to help these workers find jobs in growing sectors of our economy. There's nothing wrong with that. But because these benefits are paid out on top of normal unemployment benefits.
Here we go. We're back, and this is Conduit News Radio. I want to remind everybody, I'm looking at an article from the Harrison Daily. It's a repost of an Associated Press article by Andrew DeMillo back on May the 3rd of 2016. This is when the news broke that Governor Asa Hutchinson's chief of staff, Michael Lamoureux, was going to resign. At the time, it was because it made headlines that he used a nonprofit, the Arkansas Faith and Freedom Coalition. There was a bunch of lobbyists that contributed to it, and then that nonprofit paid his law firm $120,000 when that nonprofit only raised $140,000 that year. And it was perfectly legal, right? It was a way for Michael Lamoureux to make $120,000. And because he's an attorney and happens to be a legislator, but he's an attorney, so it's okay, because we still got to have attorney legislators, right? Now, okay, stop for a second. As we continue through the rest of this story, and we start speculating who Senator C is in this new plea deal, who Senator A is, we know Senator A is Jeremy Hutchinson in the other two plea deals. But I honestly want you to think, as we are going through these stories, I want you to go back a couple of weeks to the press conference. The press conference that came as a result of Rusty Cranford's guilty plea that implicated Jeremy Hutchinson as receiving $500,000 in bribes. I want you to go back to the press conference that was held by Senator Jim Hendren, the governor's other nephew, and several other legislators talking about now we're going to bring up ethics reform. We're going to attempt to change some of the rules, change some of the disclosures. And folks, honestly, some of that is good. The attempt is good. I think it's too little too late because we've known that all of this has been going on, but nobody has wanted to stand up and do anything about it. Nobody themselves has wanted to go to the FBI or the Arkansas Ethics Commission. Putting that aside, I want you to go back to that moment, and I want you to remember the excuses that they would talk about, that we need attorneys in the legislature. There was this concept or this idea that we're going to attempt to do ethics, but we want to make sure that you can still be an attorney and you can still serve in the legislature. Like that even needs to be a consideration at this point. Now, I'm not suggesting if you're an attorney you shouldn't be allowed to serve. I'm suggesting can we agree how bad this is, and maybe we don't need to be trying to do a tap dance to make you see what I'm saying? The problem here is much larger, and to have concerns or considerations. I mean, if anything, you shouldn't be worried about going too far or too strict at this point. That's my point. We shouldn't be worried about going too far because they have gone too far. They're the ones, and if Michael Lamoureux and Jeremy Hutchinson, if a couple of bad apples spoil the lot, well, you know what? That's on them. And that's just the way it is. There's plenty of examples in life where that happens. Okay? So, anyway. Michael Lamoureux resigned in 2016. This plea with Jerry Walsh says that this scheme went from 2013 to 2016. That it ended around that time. About the time that Michael Lamoureux left the governor's office, because Michael Lamoureux resigned from ASA's chief of staff. You see, he was a senator, president pro temp. ASA gets elected. He becomes ASA's chief of staff, and then he has to resign in May 2016 because we found out about the $120,000, which at the time, well, it's legal, but it's very unethical. Yeah, you're right. It is very unethical. Using your position as a senator to carve out a financial niche. I will tell you this, there are people in Russellville, specifically, because that's where Michael Lamoureux is from. There are people in Russellville that knew that as an attorney he was on retainer from more than one person, from more than one source, that he was on retainer for these, and everybody knew that it was to pass bills. And yet, many people... I'm going to revisit this whole. I'm going to revisit the Russellville thing. I'm going to get back to the news though. I want to stay focused here. I don't want to get off on too many rabbit trails. Let's go back to the plea. Okay, Arkansas Senator C served as a senator in the Arkansas Senate during the 89th General Assembly. Arkansas Senator C, due to his senior position in the Arkansas Senate, had the power to prevent bills from coming to the floor for a vote, had the power to affect which appropriation bills were funded, and had the authority to vote on state contracts due to his position on the Legislative Council. Arkansas Senator C was also a licensed attorney in the state of Arkansas during the relevant time period and operated a law firm. Okay. So all arrows, there's some gray, maybe this is also Jeremy Hutchinson, but most people are saying this is likely Michael Lamoureux. Let's get to the actual conspiracy, the manner and means. The manner and means by which Walsh, the conspirators, and others, known and unknown, included but were not limited to the following. Walsh used the nonprofit funds to pay Arkansas Senator C. Walsh, Cranford, and Arkansas Senator C. understood that these payments were paid to Arkansas Senator C. in exchange for Arkansas Senator C. using his official capacity to influence officials at DHS and DYS, meaning Department of Youth Services, Department of Health Services, or Department of Human Services. To conceal the conspiracy and payments, Walsh diverted funds from SAYS without the authority. I think we've been over some of this. If we scroll down here, let's see here. No. Actually, we haven't been over this part. So this is, let's go down to B here. Walsh says, no, hang on. Skipping back up, because this is the most important part of this entire plea. This is the most important part of the entire plea. In exchange for Senator C. using his official capacity to influence officials from DHS and DYS to conceal the conspiracy and payments, Walsh diverted funds from SAYS, the nonprofit, without authority from the board, and made monthly payments to Arkansas Senator C. in the form of retainers and legal fees without the expectation that Arkansas Senator C. would perform any legal work. That is the most important part of the document, in my opinion, and I'm sure maybe there's more, but to me that's a huge deal, that Jerry Walsh, the executive director of Southern Arkansas Youth Services, is saying, yeah, I'm pleading guilty to paying Senator C X amount of dollars a month, and I had the expectation he would perform zero legal services, but that he would influence the right people, he would pass bills if needed to pass bills, he would keep my government contracts alive. Now, this is a federal case, but there's a little thing called state procurement laws, and those have clearly been violated here as well. Walsh concealed the payments to Arkansas Senator C., Rusty Cranford, and his lobbying firm by not seeking the required approval for the payments from SAYS Board of Directors. Oh, why? Maybe they would have to go through some sort of formal process. Number 23, in furtherance of the conspiracy and to accomplish its purpose, Walsh, Cranford, Arkansas Senator C., and others, known and unknown. Who else? Who else was it? Was it Arkansas Senator A.? What, does Arkansas Senator A live in the Eastern District and this is a Western District case? Is that what's going on here? Interesting. I do want to say one thing here on this, and that is the people of Arkansas are counting on the U.S. attorneys in the Eastern and Western Districts of this state to get this under control and restore confidence in the government of the state of Arkansas. The people of Arkansas are counting on you to get control and and make sure justice is served, both in the Eastern and the Western District. On February 24th, 2013, Rusty Cranford wrote Jerry Walsh an email stating, "Here's the contract, brother." Attached to the email was a consulting contract for services between lobbying firm B and Southern Arkansas Youth Services, the nonprofit. Again, this has to do with a nonprofit that is presenting itself as somebody that's going to help kids, juveniles. According to the terms of the contract, Southern Arkansas Youth Services was obligated to pay $3,334 per month for 2 years to lobbying firm B. In exchange, lobbying firm B was, among other things, to provide representation during the non-legislative session months, regular legislative session months, and committee review of the General Assembly, and consultation on state legislative review, government relations, passage of legislation, opposing legislation, leveraging funding. 25. Between February 9th, 2013 and July 29th, 2013, South Arkansas Youth Services paid lobbying firm B, pursuant to this contract, in monthly $3,334 in monthly $3,334 increments. Walsh did not request authority from the board to pay Cranford. Throughout the 2013 legislative session, Walsh spoke with Cranford by telephone and email regarding several bills that impacted youth services providers. Among other matters, Cranford worked for SAYS as a lobbyist to advance HB 2278, commonly called the Juvenile Justice Board Bill, and also worked to defeat SB 335, commonly known as the Close to Home Act, which Walsh believed would negatively impact South Arkansas Youth Services. Also, during the 2013 legislative session, the Arkansas State Claims Commission was considering whether to reduce an award of damages against DYS resulting from a crime committed by a juvenile in their custody. The initial award against DYS was approximately $1.6 million. Youth service providers were told by representatives from DHS and DYS that any amount awarded would come out of DYS contracts with youth service providers. That amount was later reduced on appeal during the Claims Commission. On or about March 12th, Walsh emailed a representative of DHS stating, "I did instruct Cranford and another lobbyist working for Cranford to work that claim hearing on my nickel. $500,000 is better than 1.6. I think every efforts to minimize on this award to the lower figure helped." The DHS representative responded, "I agree, and we appreciate the help, Jerry." This response was then forwarded to Rusty Cranford. Let's talk about the hiring of Senator C, shall we? Then I've got some audio I want you to listen to. Near the close of the legislative session in 2013, Walsh became concerned regarding DHS and DYS attempts to award youth service contracts to out-of-state providers and promulgate new regulations that would negatively impact SAYS. Cranford told Walsh that if Walsh wanted to preserve SAYS's contracts with the state of Arkansas and to prevent DHS and DYS from taking negative action, Walsh needed to hire Arkansas Senator C and Person 4 and pay higher lobbying fees. On or about May 13th, 2013, Walsh wrote to Cranford and asked, "What day and time and location is my appointment as we discussed last week?" Cranford responded, "Wednesday, noon, Little Rock." On or about May 15th, 2013, Cranford arranged a meeting between Walsh and Arkansas Senator C at the state capitol. At the meeting, which Walsh and Arkansas Senator C attended, Walsh discussed with Arkansas Senator C Southern Arkansas Youth Services' need to stop DHS and DYS from threatening to pull state contracts from South Arkansas Youth Services, and Arkansas Senator C agreed to help. In exchange, Walsh agreed to pay Arkansas Senator C a retainer and legal fees in an amount set by Cranford. Walsh understood that in exchange for the retainer and legal fees, Arkansas Senator C agreed to take favorable official action to benefit Walsh by influencing Arkansas officials to preserve contracts with the state of Arkansas and to influence DHS and DYS from taking negative action against Southern Arkansas Youth Services. Arkansas Senator C and Cranford understood that these payments were made without the expectation that Arkansas Senator C would perform any legal work. Let's stop. I want to take you to a flashback. I want to go to the opening day of session in 2013 for the 89th General Assembly. And I want you to hear Michael Lamoureux. This was his first time presiding as the president pro temp, as the head of the Arkansas Senate. And he talked a little bit about Medicaid expansion debate that was coming up. He talked a little bit about, hey, we're all fun, we're joking, we're going to treat each other with respect. You can treat each other with respect, and you can also, at the same time, be trying to enrich yourself by taxpayer expense. Because this is a nonprofit that's getting government contracts, and that money is being used to pay off senators to make sure that you keep getting your government contracts. I just want you guys to understand how these people have no problem standing up in front of you and acting like everything is perfectly fine. Here's a flashback. It's an opening day speech.
Members, I want to thank each of you for this opportunity, and I commit to serve each of you as you commit to serve your people. Whether you're Senator Elliott or Senator Sanders, whether you're Senator David Johnson or Senator Bart Hester, or the rest of us in the middle. Many observers have said this session will be all about Medicaid. I've met with Senators Bookout, Chesterfield, and Teague, and I can tell you that I've heard serious concerns about helping the poor, helping us have health care, and without it, the viability of our hospitals and our rural health care system. But I can also tell you I've met with Senators Irvin and Bledsoe, and I've heard valid concerns about the potential harm some proposals could do to our health care system. I can promise you all, both sides have facts to support their views. If we cannot have an honest, respectful debate here in this special place, then one won't be had. To me, this session is not all about Medicaid.
It's not a special
place.
It's
about how we treat each other as we debate Medicaid.
The pomp and the circumstance,
a foundation of
the corruption.
And bipartisanship has been established in this chamber by Senator Paul Bookout and his leadership. It is my hope that we continue to build on that foundation. I plead with each of you to work towards a productive session, be humble when you prevail, and be quick to look forward when you do not. Let's get to work.
That is, so strange. That was Senator Michael Lamoureux, President Pro Tem, opening in 2013. Just wanted you to hear what he had to say. Those were his hopes for the session, and then a couple months later, he's inking a deal with South Arkansas Youth Services to use his influence and to use his power. Now, this was Governor Asa Hutchinson's future chief of staff, by the way, and I just have something to say about that. Listen, I know I am one of Asa Hutchinson's biggest critics in this state, if not the biggest. I understand that, okay? But come on, guys. The governor has surrounded himself with people like Michael Lamoureux, Jake Files, John Woods, and others, okay? And he supported these people up until the point of, oh, well, now I can't support them anymore, right? Up until the $120,000. So the question I have is this. What does it say about the recent elections that Asa Hutchinson involved himself in? What does it say when he supports these candidates that he supported in the Republican primaries against sitting Republicans who actually were trying to pass bills to prevent or expose this corruption? What does that say? That is a legitimate question when you have bills trying to expose or prevent this type of corruption, and he opposes those candidates. What does it say? It's an honest question. We got to take a break. It's Johnny Cash Friday.
What does the name Triple R have to do with bail bonds? Well, the Triple R stands for reliable, respectful, and relentless. When in need of bail bonds, you only need one number. Call 866-593-7457. Even if Triple R can't help, they'll take the time to provide you with the numbers of other bond companies in your area that can be of service. That's why they're the hub of Arkansas bail bonds. Triple R Bail Bonds has an app, they're paperless, and always reliable, respectful, and relentless.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
We wind up paying greater benefits to those who lose their jobs because of foreign competition than we do to their friends and neighbors who are laid off due to domestic competition. Anyone must agree that this is unfair. Putting these two programs on the same footing will save $1.15 billion in just 1 year. Earlier, I made mention of changing categorical grants to states and local governments into block grants. Now, we know, of course, that the categorical grant programs burden local and state governments with a mass of federal regulations and federal paperwork. Ineffective targeting, wasteful administrative overhead, all can be eliminated by shifting the resources and decision-making authority to local and state government. This will also consolidate programs which are scattered throughout the federal bureaucracy, bringing government closer to the people and saving $23.9 billion over the next 5 years. Our program for economic renewal deals with a number of programs which at present are not cost-effective. An example is Medicaid. Right now, Washington provides the states with unlimited matching payments for their expenditures. At the same time, we here in Washington pretty much dictate how the states are going to manage those programs. We want to put a cap on how much.
All right, so welcome back to the program. It's Johnny Cash Friday. We've been going over this news about Jerry Walsh, who accepted, or pled guilty, rather, to essentially being involved in a conspiracy with Senator C., who we think is Senator Michael Lamoureux, the governor's former chief of staff, to essentially, influence the government and take money and funnel it through his law firm and to enrich himself for no legal work but government work. So we've been talking about all of this, and listen, we know from the Arkansas Times interview with Jerry Walsh that this company, South Arkansas Youth Services, this nonprofit that was trying to keep its government contracts alive and pay off legislators to do it, contracted with not only Senator Lamoureux, but Senator Jeremy Hutchinson. And I'm just wondering, why wasn't Senator Hutchinson specifically mentioned in this particular guilty plea? Okay, we have other allegations of him doing the same thing. I mean, are we to believe that this was somehow different, that he somehow shielded himself? It's very clear in Arkansas, attorneys were under the belief that they're more than welcome and it's more than legal to, as long as your contract says no lobbying services, lobbying services are prohibited, then you can take the retainer and pass bills for him, but because you're a lawyer, it's okay. Now, the federal government seems to think that Arkansas loophole doesn't apply to federal law, and that's why they're going after these guys. But it did dawn on me yesterday as I was going over this plea and I was going over everything. I was thinking, where is Senator Jeremy Hutchinson's name, or, label Senator A? And then I thought, surely they're not going to make Senator Lamoureux stay true to the beginning of his name. I mean, is Senator Lamoureux just being used as a sacrificial lamb here?
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
The federal government will contribute, but at the same time allow the states much more flexibility in managing and structuring the programs. I know from our experience in California that such flexibility could have led to far more cost-effective reforms. Now, this will bring a savings of $1 billion next year. The space program has been and is important to America, and we plan to continue it. We believe, however, that a reordering of priorities to focus on the most important and cost-effective NASA programs can result in a savings of $250,000. Now, coming down from space to the mailbox, the Postal Service has been consistently unable to live within its operating budget. It is still dependent on large federal subsidies. We propose reducing those subsidies by $632 million in 1982 to press the Postal Service into becoming more effective. And in subsequent years, the savings will continue to add up. The Economic Regulatory Administration in the Department of Energy has programs to force companies to convert to specific fuels. It has the authority to administer a gas rationing plan, and prior to decontrol, it ran the oil price control program. With these and other regulations gone, we can save several hundreds of millions of dollars over the next few years. I'm sure there's one department you've been waiting for me to mention, the Department of Defense. It's the only department in our entire program that will actually be increased over the present budgeted figure. But even here, there was no exemption. The Department of Defense came up with a number of cuts which reduced the budget increase needed to restore our military balance. These measures will save $2.9 billion in 1982 outlays, and by 1986 a total of $28.2 billion will have been saved, or perhaps I should say will have been made available for the necessary things that we must do. The aim will be to provide the most effective defense for the lowest possible cost. I believe that my duty as president requires that I recommend increases in defense spending over the coming years. I know that you're all aware, but I think it bears saying again that since 1970, the Soviet Union has invested $300 billion more in its military forces than we have. As a result of its massive military buildup, the Soviets have made a significant numerical advantage in strategic nuclear delivery systems, tactical aircraft, submarines, artillery, and anti-aircraft defense. To allow this imbalance to continue is a threat to our national security. Notwithstanding our economic straits, making the financial changes beginning now is far less costly than waiting and having to attempt a crash program several years from now. We remain committed to the goal of arms limitation through negotiation. I hope we can persuade our adversaries to come to realistic, balanced, and verifiable agreements. But as we negotiate, our security must be fully protected by a balanced and realistic defense program. Now, let me say a word here about the general problem of waste and fraud in the federal government. One government estimate indicated that fraud alone may account for anywhere from 1% to 10%, as much as $25 billion of federal expenditures for social programs. If the tax dollars that are wasted or mismanaged are added to this fraud total, the staggering dimensions of this problem begin to emerge. The Office of Management and Budget is now putting together an interagency task force to attack waste and fraud. We're also planning to appoint as inspectors general highly trained professionals who will spare no effort to do this job. No administration can promise to immediately stop a trend that has grown in recent years as quickly as government expenditures themselves. But let me say this, waste and fraud in the federal government is exactly what I've called it before. An unrelenting national scandal, a scandal we're bound and determined to do something about.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Senator see ya in 15 to 20. 870-275-9799. That's the telephone number. You can sound off text that number, call us. You can also, over at facebook.com/Conduit News, sound off there as we're broadcasting live. After the first hour, that is what Joe titled the podcast, Senator see ya in 15 to 20, talking about Senator C referenced in the new guilty plea, the newest guilty plea that's ensnared Arkansas citizens, nonprofit owners, as well as Arkansas politicians now being more implicated. Now we have Senator C that appears to be the governor's former chief of staff, Michael Lamoureux, who is implicated in all of this. Let's actually get Michael Lamoureux's statement on this because he has decided to respond. I understand. Let's see here. That was over at the Arkansas Times. So this headline here: Youth Services nonprofit referenced in Wilkins bribery plea. Hired Senator Lamoureux and Hutchinson to do legal work. This was from May the 2nd. Okay, this was another guilty plea that spawned this article. But let's go to the newest one. Max Brantley yesterday. Corruption probe nets another guilty plea, implicates another senator. This was originally, the first I read about it was on Arkansas Business. The Gazette has a good write-up in the paper about this today. But we've basically spent the first hour of the program kind of going over who Senator C is, going over the graft scheme, going over the idea that you're going to take legal fees as retainer and not doing any legal work, but you're going to manipulate the system. You're going to, grease the skids, if you will, of DHS and DYS. This was all done in the name of trying to help kids, which is just really disgusting and awful as well. But see, at the bottom of this, we have a statement here from Michael Lamoureux. I received a response from Lamoureux, this is Max Brantley writing this, to emailed questions about today's development in his business relationship with Jerry Walsh, who just pled guilty. Quote, I am just hearing about this. I have not have any communication with law enforcement about this development. Neither legal fees nor campaign contributions have ever influenced my behavior as a public official. Once I have a clearer understanding of the situation, I will comment further. Now, going back to Benjamin Hardy's interview with Jerry Walsh in early May included this. Walsh said he believes Southern Arkansas Youth Services and other clients of Cranford were used and predicted more legislators would be implicated in the widening federal probe. Quote, there's going to be a lot of people making statements. There's all kinds of allegations, and if you had any dealings with Cranford Coalition, you're going to be tainted. Some of it will be true, and some of it won't be. So you have a statement there from Michael Lamoureux saying, I have never done anything. There's been nothing that's ever influenced my behavior as a public official one way or the other. Well, it's interesting because we now have the federal government basically convicting Jerry Walsh, and in that indictment or in that, guilty plea, we have Senator C mentioned. Senator C was on the Legislative Council during the 89th General Assembly, was in the leadership during the 89th General Assembly, could stop bills from coming to the floor, could stop appropriations. Need I go on? Who might that be? Well, the media, it is pretty much conclusive across the press that this is one of two people. This is either Michael Lamoureux or Jeremy Hutchinson, and it looks like when you actually analyze stopping bills coming to the floor, as the plea says, as government document says, that's got to be Michael Lamoureux. That's got to be the president pro temp of the Senate to stop bills from coming to the floor. Let's go to that May article, shall we? Because this is what's interesting. The headline from Benjamin Hardy back on May 2nd, Youth Services Nonprofit referenced in Wilkins' bribery plea hired Senators Lamoureux and Hutchinson to do legal work. The former director of now defunct Youth Services Nonprofit that appears to be referenced in a federal bribery plea agreement. Boy, there's a lot of those. There's so many plea agreements we're having trouble. I'm having trouble figuring. It's like, it's like you've collected too many baseball cards and you just can't remember which ones you have. I mean, these things are just piling up. Jerry Walsh, the longtime director of Magnolia-based South Arkansas Youth Services, matches the description of an individual referred to as Person 3 in the former Senator Hank Wilkins plea, which was announced Monday. So Benjamin Hardy reaches out here, starts to ask Walsh a few questions. He says Walsh acknowledged that SAYS held a contract with the Cranford Coalition, a firm operated by Rusty Cranford, who tried to have a guy killed in New Jersey, by the way. According to the federal government, Rusty Cranford tried to have a key witness in the federal case against Preferred Family Health Care murdered. Or the Cumming case, or whatever. Keep that in mind. When they arrested him, he had, $17,000 in cash and a revolver on him. This was after he had an initial meeting with a potential contract killer. Need to remember that. The Medicaid Mafia. It's a term coined by Senator Brian King, who was defeated by State Representative Bob Ballinger with the support of Governor Asa Hutchinson after Brian King was one of the most vocal people at the Marble Palace trying to expose this mess. And I asked that question last hour. At what point does Governor Hutchinson either have some responsibility for his friends, or he's the most unlucky person in his associations and friendships ever? In the state of Arkansas history, maybe. I mean, come on. You surround yourself with Jake Files. Well, he's going to jail. John Woods, Mike and Neal. You surround yourself with, obviously your nephew, Jeremy Hutchinson. Michael Lamoureux was your chief of staff. I mean, how many people do you have to have around you before people start saying, huh? Oh, by the way, are these the guys that came to Asa and begged him to run for office because we needed somebody to protect the status quo? Walsh said he met Wilkins a handful of times at the state capitol, found him to be a very pleasant man. Asked whether he or SAS ever had direct business dealings with other legislators besides Wilkins, Walsh said the nonprofit had hired 2 Republican senators, both attorneys, in recent years, Jeremy Hutchinson of Little Rock and Senate President Pro Temp Michael Lamoureux of Russellville. Senator Hutchinson, who is Governor Hutchinson's nephew, matches the description of an unnamed Senator A in the Wilkins agreement. Senator A is not accused of any crime in the Wilkins plea. However, the document indicates this lawmaker closely corresponded with Wilkins and a lobbyist who appears to be Cranford. Walsh said that South Arkansas Youth Services hired Hutchinson as an attorney about a year and a half ago to help the nonprofit appeal the loss of a contract. Well, isn't that what Michael Lamoureux, isn't that what Senator C is accused of doing here in the new plea? Being hired to appeal the loss of a contract, to make sure the contract isn't lost, to get the contract with the government back. It's been reported before that Hutchinson represented South Arkansas Youth Services as an attorney in 2016, around the same time Youth Services nonprofit was fighting a DHS decision. Keep in mind, this says in the plea agreement that we have that this started in May of 2013 and ended sometime in 2016. Okay? You can see why some people are saying this could be Hutchinson, but most people are saying that it looks like it's Lamoureux. It's interesting, though, that they didn't, and I don't know how, I'm not an attorney, okay? But it is interesting that there is no Senator A or B in this new plea agreement. They skip A and B, and they just go to C. But Jeremy Hutchinson, in two separate plea agreements, has been labeled as Senator A. Senator A in the Wilkins agreement, and Senator A in the Milton Rusty Cranford plea agreement. That agreement alleged that he bribed Jeremy Hutchinson $500,000. Okay. Quote, we had that meeting with Hutchinson, with him, where he said what he could and couldn't do. He could do legal work, but he couldn't do bills on our behalf. Okay, well, now this guy is saying different things about Senator C. Whoever Senator C is, right? Senator C in 15 to 20. Asked whether SAYS retained Hutchinson as an attorney as far back as 2013. During the time period covered by the Wilkins plea, Walsh said the agency could have, but I never had any conversation with him about legislation. Senator Hutchinson supported a major piece of juvenile justice reform legislation he opposed in 2013, the Close to Home Act. Well, maybe he saw things differently a few years later. So, again, this does lend more credence to the fact that it's Michael Lamoureux. Senator C is Michael Lamoureux and not the governor's nephew in this case. Hutchinson was chair of the Judiciary Committee, and he voted it out of committee, Walsh said. Committee votes are not available on the Arkansas legislature's website, but the record shows Hutchinson did not vote for the Close to Home Act. Oh, well, he didn't vote for it then. Huh. He didn't vote for the thing. By the way, this is referenced in today's plea, the Close to Home Act, and how Jerry Walsh was trying to get Senator C and others to make sure that they defeat this because it's going to hurt his business. The Close to Home Act would have potentially reconfigured the state's funding for youth services. You can't have that. Now let's go down here to Lamoureux's involvement. Again, this is an article from back in May by Benjamin Hardy at the Arkansas Times. They talk about how he left the Senate to become the governor's chief of staff. But then Lamoureux got snagged, right? Lamoureux got snagged because it was reported that he got $120,000. When? In 2013. Wow. 2013 was 2013 was a profitable year for Michael Lamoureux. He gets to be the president pro temp, and if he is Senator C, he was cleaning up. He got that $120,000 from Faith and Freedom Coalition. Then he got the retainer fee from Southern Arkansas Youth Services. How many other retainer fees did Michael Lamoureux have? Man, I'm telling you, it's crazy. It's also crazy how aggressive some people are when you try to support conservative candidates over big government candidates in primary elections. That's kind of interesting, how aggressive you can be when everybody knows that you have used your position as a government official to carve out a financial niche for yourself and taking advantage of the people that you claim to serve. But you claim to serve them humbly, right? That's what you said. We played the clip last hour of Michael Lamoureux. Be humble when you win. Also, you know what's also been in the news today? This week, referral fees. Referral fees from the teacher retirement system. And there's speculation that the $4.1 million that went to the Texas law firm as a referral fee for hooking up Arkansas teacher retirement with the Labaton law firm and the class action lawsuit, there's some speculation that that $4.1 million went somewhere else after that because they've got emails talking about considerable time, money, and favors being spent in the state of Arkansas. I wonder who got a cut of that $4.1 million, and did they have senator before their name? What do you think? Did they have senator before their name? Yeah, I think the FBI needs to get involved in that as well. I agree with State Representative Mark Lowry. Oh, by the way, the governor came out and said he disagrees with Mark Lowry and that he supports George Hopkins remaining the head of Arkansas teacher retirement. So Lamoureux is the chief of staff, but then he leaves in 2016, right as this plea agreement says the scheme ended. Lamoureux's name also surfaced recently in testimony given in the corruption trial of former state senator John Woods because he obviously gave a big portion of his general improvement money to John Woods' Ecclesia College development. Wonder if there was kickbacks there. We don't know what Ecclesia did with the money per se because the state will not pursue them and find out exactly how they spent the money. It's very, very sad. But the big news here is we have essentially a previous article with Jerry Walsh admitting that he contracted with two senators, Lamoureux and Hutchinson. Senator C, mentioned in the plea agreement yesterday, filed by the Western District of Arkansas, where Jerry Walsh pleads guilty to bribing legislators, or at least one. It's pretty clear it appears to be Michael Lamoureux. It appears to be Michael Lamoureux. Okay, let's see. What do we have? What do we want to do next? I mean, there's so much here that I tell you what we do next. You know what we do next, folks? We demand the indictments. We demand justice. I'm serious. Whoever Senator C is, okay? Senator C must be indicted. Senator A, whoever Senator A is, Senator A must be indicted. The people of Arkansas deserve justice. And I have no confidence in these people. I mean, I don't have confidence in them now trying to self-report and reform their ethics. This is now rampant, ladies and gentlemen. This is rampant. Former politicians, right? Eddie Cooper, Hank Wilkins, Micah Neal, John Woods, Jake Files. Then you start hitting the lobbyists up, right? Or did I mention Hank Wilkins? Then you got to hit the lobbyists up. Rusty Cranford obviously is a big one. Now we have implicated Michael Lamoureux, Jeremy Hutchinson. They've both been implicated in these plea agreements. It is time to clean house. And I want to just say one more thing to our U.S. attorneys, to Dak Keese. I mean, you're obviously pursuing this in some capacity, and that's fantastic. And I don't know what Cody Highland's doing, but you guys got to understand something. The people of Arkansas we gotta have confidence in our government again, and all this has got to be exposed. And it doesn't matter who's involved. All of this it needs to be exposed. We're talking about taxpayer money. We're talking about people going down there and enriching themselves. We're talking about corruption, and it's got to be laid bare. And so I would just say that the people of Arkansas are counting on our U.S. attorneys. I mean, the people of Arkansas are counting on our U.S. attorneys to do something about this. And you're certainly doing something, but it's so far we wouldn't know. Here's the truth. I mean, we wouldn't know half of what we know if it wasn't for Missouri. If it wasn't for the prosecution in Missouri and the U.S. attorneys in Missouri, they're the ones that have laid bare all of this. We wouldn't know about Jeremy Hutchinson if it wasn't for the guilty plea of Rusty Cranford in the Western District of Missouri. Right? But we finally have an Arkansas one, and it looks like it's implicating Michael Lamoureux. I hope So I have a healthy skepticism of anybody, healthy American attitude of government in general. I just, I don't want. I guess it crossed my mind yesterday. I'm just going to be honest with you. It crossed my mind yesterday that, are we going to stop? Is there a backstop to where we just end it? Is there something that's, we can't go this far? We can't go this far up the ladder because, yeah, I know it's not a pleasant thought to have, but you just don't want things to end. You want the totality of information to come out and play out the way it's going to play out. And you don't want it just to end with Senator C in 15 to 20, or who appears to be Michael Lamoureux. You don't want Michael Lamoureux to just be, okay, now we've got one. Here it is. It was all him. Michael Lamoureux would then be a sacrificial lamb, if you will. We're going to take a break. It's Johnny Cash Friday. For our online audience, you're listening to the 1981 State of the Union address delivered by President Ronald Reagan. Back in a moment.
The federal government will contribute, but at the same time allow the states much more flexibility in managing and structuring the programs. I know from our experience in California that such flexibility could have led to far more cost-effective reforms. Now, this will bring a savings of $1 billion next year. The space program has been and is important to America, and we plan to continue it. We believe, however, that a reordering of priorities to focus on the most important and cost-effective NASA programs can result in a savings of $250,000. Now, coming down from space to the mailbox, the Postal Service has been consistently unable to live within its operating budget. It is still dependent on large federal subsidies. We propose reducing those subsidies by $632 million in 1982 to press the Postal Service into becoming more effective. And in subsequent years, the savings will continue to add up. The Economic Regulatory Administration in the Department of Energy has programs to force companies to convert to specific fuels. It has the authority to administer a gas rationing plan, and prior to decontrol, it ran the oil price control program. With these and other regulations gone, we can save several hundreds of millions of dollars over the next few years. I'm sure there's one department you've been waiting for me to mention, the Department of Defense. It's the only department in our entire program that will actually be increased over the present budgeted figure. But even here, there was no exemption. The Department of Defense came up with a number of cuts which reduced the budget increase needed to restore our military balance. These measures will save $2.9 billion in 1982 outlays, and by 1986, a total of $28.2 billion will have been saved, or perhaps I should say will have been made available for the necessary things that we must do. The aim will be to provide the most effective defense for the lowest possible cost. I believe that my duty as president requires that I recommend increases in defense spending over the coming years.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Johnny Cash Friday. Thanks so much for being with us. I feel like we've had a jam-packed day today. We've only talked about one subject. I have a show. A show schedule, a prep that was actually much more diverse this morning, and we're going to have to bump some of that over into Monday's broadcasts. We've got, all kinds of stuff. We've got two tribes now. They're now pouring money into a ballot measure, trying to get casinos passed here in the state of Arkansas. There's a great article up at conduitforaction.org we might have time for by the end of this program, talking about how God and limited government have now been put back in the Republican Party of Arkansas's platform after they tried to make it more progressive, more liberal. We also have the State Chamber of Commerce's Randy Zook commenting on the Donald Trump tariffs. And so we've got a lot of stuff to get to. But anyway, we're going to be back here in just a moment. I'm going to introduce you to somebody new. Don't go anywhere.
I know that you're all aware, but I think it bears saying again that since 1970, the Soviet Union has invested $300 billion more in its military forces than we have. As a result of its massive military buildup, the Soviets have made a significant numerical advantage in strategic nuclear delivery systems, tactical aircraft, submarines, artillery, and anti-aircraft defense. To allow this imbalance to continue is a threat to our national security. Notwithstanding our economic straits, making the financial changes beginning now is far less costly than waiting and having to attempt a crash program several years from now. We remain committed to the goal of arms limitation through negotiation. I hope we can persuade our adversaries to come to realistic, balanced, and verifiable agreements. But as we negotiate, our security must be fully protected by a balanced and realistic defense program. Now, let me say a word here about the general problem of waste and fraud in the federal government. One government estimate indicated that fraud alone may account for anywhere from 1 to 10%, as much as $25 billion of federal expenditures for social programs. If the tax dollars that are wasted or mismanaged are added to this fraud total, the staggering dimensions of this problem begin to emerge. The Office of Management and Budget is now putting together an interagency task force to attack waste and fraud. We're also planning to appoint as inspectors general highly trained professionals who will spare no effort to do this job. No administration can promise to immediately stop a trend that has grown in recent years as quickly as government expenditures themselves. But let me say this. Waste and fraud in the federal government is exactly what I've called it before, an unrelenting national scandal, a scandal we're bound and determined to do something about. Marching in lockstep with the whole program of reductions in spending is the equally important program of reduced tax rates. Both are essential if we're to have economic recovery. It's time to create new jobs, to build and rebuild industry, and to give the American people room to do what they do best. And that can only be done with a tax program which provides incentive to increase productivity for both workers and industry. Our proposal is for a 10% across-the-board cut every year for 3 years in the tax rates for all individual income taxpayers, make a total cut in tax rates of 30%. This 3-year reduction will also apply to the tax on unearned income, leading toward an eventual elimination of the present differential between the tax on earned and unearned income. Now, I would have hoped that we could be retroactive with this. But as it stands, the effective starting date for these 10% personal income tax rate reductions will call for as of July 1st of this year. Again, let me remind you that while this 30% reduction will leave the taxpayers with $500 billion more in their pockets over the next 5 years, it's actually only a reduction in the tax increase already built into the system. Unlike some past quote-unquote tax reforms, this is not merely a shift of wealth between different sets of taxpayers. This proposal for an equal reduction in everyone's tax rates will expand our national prosperity, enlarge national incomes, and increase opportunities for all Americans. Some will argue, I know, that reducing tax rates now will be inflationary. A solid body of economic experts does not agree. And tax cuts adopted over the past 3/4 of a century indicate these economic experts are right. They will not be inflationary. I've had advice that in 1985, our real production in goods and services will grow by 20% and be $300 billion higher than it is today. The average worker's wage will rise in real purchasing power 8%. And this is in after-tax dollars. And this, of course, is predicated on a complete program of tax cuts and spending reductions being implemented. The other part of the tax package is aimed directly at providing business and industry with the capital needed to modernize and engage in more research and development. This will involve an increase in depreciation allowances.
Thanks so much for being with us. Happy Friday to everybody out there driving to work. It's almost over. And you're starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. And we are very, very grateful for that. So I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I had a guest scheduled. We were going to talk about, he's an author and a foreign policy guy, and had a guest scheduled, and we're kind of unable to get a hold of him. And so it's good because we have a ton of content to get to. And so here we go. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's a few stories that I just can't let roll over into Monday because at that point it's not going to be relevant. I have to say this is kind of just point of personal privilege. There's something that really grinds my gears right now, and that is that honestly, it is the slow decay of the quality of art in our society today, and the really just the quality of it's terrible, but also the motivations, the whole concept, redefining what an artist is. It's just you see it everywhere. Matter of fact, in Francis Schaeffer's book, How Should We Then Live?, which is a book really written to the Christian church. And the question is, how should we then live when the Christian consensus goes away? We talked about this earlier in the week with Matt Giberson. The Christian consensus goes away in your society, and you have more and more immoral people, and then you have more and more government laws and bigger government that comes down to try to deal with it, but then immoral people always find a way to break the laws. And so eventually you come to, a totalitarian state. And that's what Francis Schaeffer, theologian, was warning about in his book, How Should We Then Live? Well, one of the things he did to illustrate his point is he looked at how the church functioned in the first century. He looked at how the church functioned in medieval times. He looked at how the church functioned through all these different eras. And it's fascinating. But one of the things that he says, one of the observations he makes, and actually this, I believe this is in How Should We Then Live? It also might be in the God Who Is, his God series, the God Who Is Real, the God Who Is There. I can't remember. But anyway, he talks about the Roman currency and how if you look at Roman coins and the art and the drawings of the Caesars on the coins, if you look at early Rome, they're impeccable. They are very technically well done. The craftsmanship, the art, you can tell who the person is. But towards the end, towards the fall of Rome, when they're losing their identity, when Rome was destroyed from within, that's pretty much common knowledge. You look at the degradation of their artistic merit, and it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And the coins, if you look at an early Roman coin versus a latter, you can tell that they were getting sloppy. And what was acceptable to them, at the end of their empire, wouldn't have been acceptable at the beginning of the empire. And I think there's something to that. I think art certainly reflects culture. Art certainly reflects society. And if you look at some of the art out there, well, first of all, some of it's not art. Okay. Putting a crucifix in a jar of urine and putting it on a pedestal and saying that this is art, so that's not art, okay? Now, that's being called art, but it's not art, okay? I'm not even an abstract painting type of guy, just so you know. I know other people are, but I like figurative art. I don't really like the abstract stuff. It doesn't speak to me. There's no, painting full of shapes that arouses some sort of emotion. I don't even get into that. And the whole visual thing is a whole different ballgame for me anyway. But then you have the art of acting, if people want to call it that, the art of pretending to be somebody else, the art of studying the different, you've got method acting, you've got all these different, forms. Are you an actor that is like a light switch, you can turn it on and off and it's a craft, or do you use emotion to get where you need to go? These are all things that are discussed. Well, recently in the news, there's one actress who politically is just absolutely, so far from what I am and probably what many of you are. But you probably best know her for her work in the MCU as the Black Widow. Her name is Scarlett Johansson, and she got all of this flack because she was cast as a transgender in an upcoming role. And this is when I knew she was in trouble. I saw a website in an article saying that from a conservative website that she should play the role, but everybody was giving her all this backlash. They were saying, well, you're not a transgender. You can't play a transgender part because you're not transgender. How dare you? You're so insensitive and blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, are we forgetting something here? This is called acting. This is the whole basis of your profession, is to pretend to be someone else. And it really has frustrated me all week. And this is kind of old news because this really happened last week, but I've had it on the schedule to talk about this entire week, but I've kept bumping it because there's been new stuff that's happened. And I think to myself, Scarlett Johansson drops this transgender role, and now she's facing this, backlash. And I'm sure everybody now is like, oh, everything's fine. You're so amazing. But essentially what we have here is we're now, not only is our visual art being degraded, now we're redefining what the performance arts are and what you can and you can't do. This has been happening a very long time. But you take somebody who's a liberal, who's a progressive, who's an anti-Trumper, and yet they're turning on her so quickly, saying you can't pretend to be someone you're not. You're an actor that can't pretend to be someone you're not. This makes no sense to me. Absolutely not. So Scarlett Johansson is not allowed to be an actor. She's not allowed to pretend to be who she's not. Actors are no longer allowed to be actors in this politically correct dystopia that the left has created for themselves. The left wants to eat their own, in a way. Scarlett Johansson then caved to the political correct speech police, which are now, I guess, performance art police? Which, by the way, it's not even art. Artists used to be liberal. Artists used to be about freedom. Artists used to be about expression of thought. And now they're not. It is unbelievable what is happening to our artistic community here that I'm sure I would agree or disagree with politically most of the time. And that's because you don't understand why you're able to practice your art in a free society. And it's because people before you studied war and politics. And, well, John Adams said it best. I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. Do you get the progression there? You have to have access to resources, have to have hard work in order to generate prosperity, and it's out of not being worried and consumed every day about how you're going to feed yourself that people have disposable income to go see a movie with Scarlett Johansson in it, right? A lot of actors don't understand that. They just want they're socialists. They don't understand free market, and they don't understand that in order for people to want to waste their money on entertainment, they got to have some reasonable expectation that, their stuff's going to be back at home when they get home from, watching whatever silly thing you're doing on stage. And so, then, of course, actors, because they can, because they pretend to be these other people, then they like to think that they, understand politics in many regards. They try to inject themselves and use their celebrity to advocate for these liberal causes. I know you're probably saying, Paul, why are you trying to point this out? It's almost like I'm standing up for the concept of freedom of speech and the concept of, artistic integrity. And it's interesting to me that the left isn't anymore. They are rolling over, and they don't want an actor to be able to be an actor. And it's just so frustrating to me. The fact that artistic pursuits are a result of basic needs being met, does the fact that our art is now being destroyed, okay, does that mean that our basic securities are next? So, in other words, access to food and shelter. So if what John Adams says here is correct, okay, if what John Adams says is correct, that he must study war and politics, so his sons study mathematics and philosophy, so their sons get to study geography, history, painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, is the reverse in order? My hypothesis is this, or my question is this. If the legitimacy of our artistic pursuits is getting worse and worse, it's degrading in merit and in not only just like skill, but also moral competency, moral values. Does that mean that the other things on that list start to become threatened? Meaning if your art is worse and worse, is your security as a society worse because, I don't know, maybe your philosophers are now dumber than they were. Maybe your scientists are now dumber than they were. Now that's going to really make people mad. Maybe the concept of being a secure nation and secure in your war efforts are worse off. I mean, we certainly saw that with the last administration when they removed all reference in government documents to the term radical Islam. They refused to even define who the enemy was, which from a military standpoint is crazy, because if you can't define your enemy, then it's kind of hard to develop a strategy to beat your enemy. It's just a hypothesis that I've had all week, and I wanted to share that with you today. What do you think? 870-275-9799. You can call or text. Cosmo on Facebook says, degenerate art destroys our idealism. Interesting. Degenerate art. By the way, did you guys see Judge Jeanine yesterday on The View? So I guess after our interview, shortly after our interview, and she interviewed across the country, and she was on the program yesterday. We've got that video up. She went on The View, and Whoopi Goldberg basically ended the interview, and then after came up to Judge Jeanine, according to Judge Jeanine, and basically, cussed her out, used the F word, said, get the F out of the building. Judge Jeanine said that Whoopi was so incensed that there was spit flying out of her mouth when she said it. It's unbelievable how unhinged Whoopi Goldberg got. You know why she was unhinged? If you go watch that full View interview, Judge Jeanine was confident and was stating facts, but she was also she's the type of personality you can't push around. And Whoopi Goldberg doesn't like that. And so Whoopi Goldberg just went crazy and clearly does have Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, that was what set Whoopi off, right? Trump derangement syndrome. You got Trump derangement syndrome, and then Whoopi just lost it. Well, okay, well. Hey, if you want to know if a liberal has Trump derangement syndrome, tell them they have Trump derangement syndrome and see what happens. It's kind of like a litmus test. Oh, it's fascinating. Conduitforaction.org. You need to check this article out. God and limited government have been added back into the state Republican platform. Thank goodness. The Arkansas Republican Party of Arkansas will meet on July 21st to, among other things, so tomorrow, approve the 2018 state GOP platform. Last year, Conduit for Action pointed out the platform had changed from 2014 to 2016. The most significant changes then were the removal of limited government, the power of faith in God, and other principles from the beginning of our platform. CFA has analyzed the proposed 2018 platform and how that compares to what they changed in 2016. And this is what they've added back. They added back the power of faith in God, the sanctity of life, individual responsibility and initiative, individual freedom and liberty secured by a limited government, private property, lower taxes to produce economic growth, strong national defense, the personal right to own and bear arms, the equal and just enforcement of the law, and separate and equal branches of government. Adding back limited government on pages 2, 6, and 11 of the proposed 2018 platform. They have added limited before government. They have done a lot. It's really great that what it really shows you is that the base of the party was upset that they had changed some things kind of under the nose, under the radar, and the base of the Republican Party is saying, no, we need to change this back. And that just shows you that the leadership of the Republican Party may be a little different than the people that they are representing. And so that's really good. Hey, it's Johnny Cash Friday. When we come back, I'm going to do a quick rundown of the plea of Mr. Jerry Walsh with the Arkansas Youth Services, the South Arkansas Youth Services, and how this now implicates a new senator, Senator C., many believe to be the governor's former chief of staff, Michael Lamoureux. Back in just a moment.
And this part of our tax proposal will be retroactive to January 1st. The present depreciation system is obsolete, needlessly complex, and economically counterproductive. Very simply, it bases the depreciation of plant, machinery, and vehicles and tools on their original cost with no recognition of how inflation has increased their replacement cost. We're proposing a much shorter write-off time than is presently allowed. A 5-year write-off for machinery, 3 years for vehicles and trucks, and a 10-year write-off for plant. In fiscal year 1992, under this plan, business would acquire nearly $10 billion for investment. By 1985, the figure would be nearly $45 billion. These changes are essential to provide the new investment which is needed to create millions of new jobs between now and 1985, and to make America competitive once again in the world market. Now, these won't be make-work jobs. They're productive jobs, jobs with a future. I'm well aware that there are many other desirable and needed tax changes, such as indexing the income tax brackets to protect taxpayers against inflation, the unjust discrimination against married couples if both are working and earning, tuition tax credits, the unfairness of the inheritance tax, especially to the family-owned farm and the family-owned business, and a number of others. But our program for economic recovery is so urgently needed to begin to bring down inflation that I'm asking you to act on this plan first and with great urgency. And then I pledge I will join with you in seeking these additional tax changes at the earliest date possible. American society experienced a virtual explosion in government regulation during the past decade. Between 1970 and 1979, expenditures for the major regulatory agencies quadrupled. The number of pages published annually in the Federal Register nearly tripled. The number of pages in the Code of Federal Regulations increased by nearly 2/3. The result has been higher prices, higher unemployment, and lower productivity growth. Over-regulation causes small and independent businessmen and women, as well as large businesses, to defer or terminate plans for
If you're like me, You believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
And this part of our tax proposal will be retroactive to January 1st. The present depreciation system is obsolete, needlessly complex, and economically counterproductive. Very simply, it bases the depreciation of plant, machinery, and vehicles and tools on their original cost with no recognition of how inflation has increased their replacement cost. We're proposing a much shorter write-off time than is presently allowed. A 5-year write-off for machinery, 3 years for vehicles and trucks, and a 10-year write-off for plant. In fiscal year 1992, under this plan, business would acquire nearly $10 billion for investment. By 1985, the figure would be nearly $45 billion. These changes are essential to provide the new investment which is needed to create millions of new jobs between now and 1985, and to make America competitive once again in the world market. Now, these won't be make-work jobs. They're productive jobs, jobs with a future. I'm well aware that there are many other desirable and needed tax changes, such as indexing the income tax brackets to protect taxpayers against inflation, the unjust discrimination against married couples if both are working and earning, tuition tax credits, the unfairness of the inheritance tax, especially to the family-owned farm and the family-owned business, and a number of others. But our program for economic recovery is so urgently needed to begin to bring down inflation that I'm asking you to act on this plan first and with great urgency. And then I pledge I will join with you in seeking these additional tax changes at the earliest date possible. American society experienced a virtual explosion in government regulation during the past decade. Between 1970 and 1979, expenditures for the major regulatory agencies quadrupled. The number of pages published annually in the Federal Register nearly tripled. And the number of pages in the Code of Federal Regulations increased by nearly 2/3. The result has been higher prices, higher unemployment, and lower productivity growth. Over-regulation causes small and independent businessmen and women, as well as large businesses, to defer or terminate plans for expansion, and since they're responsible for most of the new jobs, those new jobs just aren't created.
All right.
Now
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Real quick, we have another person pleading guilty. On or about May 15th, 2013, Rusty Cranford arranged a meeting between Jerry Walsh and Arkansas Senator C. Arkansas Senator C, according to this plea deal, agreed to take favorable official action to benefit Walsh and his nonprofit by influencing Arkansas officials to preserve contracts between South Arkansas Youth Services and the state of Arkansas to influence DHS and DYS from taking negative action against their contracts. Arkansas Senator C and Cranford understood that these payments were made without the expectation that Arkansas Senator C would perform any legal work. Who is Arkansas Senator C? He served as a senator in the Arkansas Senate during the 89th General Assembly. Arkansas Senator C, due to his senior position in the Arkansas Senate, had the power to prevent bills from coming to the floor for a vote, had the power to affect which appropriation bills were funded, and had the authority to vote on state contracts due to his position on the Legislative Council. Many in the media believe that Arkansas Senator C is Governor Asa Hutchinson's former chief of staff and the former president pro temp of the Senate, Senator Michael Lamoureux. Folks, we'll see you back here next week. Arkansas, be safe.